I am recording this panel, just me, just so you know. If you want to review it again later, I'll have a link to my YouTube channel so you can watch it again later if you want to go over my recommendations again at a later time. Okay, everybody good? Shall we get started? Man, you guys have clearly not had enough alcohol yet. Shall we get started? Yeah! There we go. Just because it's only 6 doesn't mean we can't have some fun. All right, so there are a lot of different reasons why we love anime. One of the big reasons that I love anime is because of the visuals. Now, we'll sort of delve into this more later, but there is a distinctive art style to anime, primarily around the eyes. Now, I specifically happen to love the really beautiful animation that can go into it. Also with anime, stories. Who here has heard of the animation age ghetto? Okay, so this is the understanding that many people still have difficulty with, that cartoons are not for children. Just because it's animated doesn't mean your 5-year-old should be watching it. People found this out very rapidly when anime started getting big in the States, when Blockbuster and family-type videos started carrying anime, and because it was animated, felt that it should be in the children's section. I still remember finding Fiend of the Overlord, or Story of the Overlord in the kids section of my Blockbuster. I had to very carefully explain to the owners that this was not a children's show. Yes?
Blockbuster by me actually screwed up worse because they didn't put parental advisory stickers on all their anime, even ones that didn't necessarily sort of like that one on Robotech, but they didn't put one on Vampire Hunter D.
Yeah, no, Vampire Hunter D is definitely one, but still, the fact that straight up hentai ended up in the kids section more than once never ceased to amaze me. But part of that is that because Japan never really had this animation is for children thing, they've been able to explore storytelling better. That's why when someone says, "Oh, I don't like anime," I'm like, "Well, what kind of anime don't you like? Do you not like horror? Do you not like action?" There are enough genres of anime that you're going to find something you like, even if it's completely weird and esoteric compared to the rest of it. And of course, sex appeal, and I'm only partially joking about that. Let's be honest about it here. So let's sort of get into one of my favorite things. I actually graduated as a bachelor's in psychology and English from Otterbein University. And one of my favorite things that I found was studying human faces. And anime actually has a very specific art style that makes us love people more than we should. Now, those two pictures you see there are every top anime 100 from the 90s combined into one face. Female and male. And there's been some more modern reintroductions, but the same thing always happens. They have very large eyes in proportion to the face. The mouth is very thin, with usually only single line used for shading. Nose tends to be small and low detail. And to be fair, it is easier to draw an anime face than it is to draw a hyper-realistic Monet-esque face. One of the reasons why this is such a big deal and why this is so important is because of something called neotenous protection. Who thinks kittens are adorable? If you're not raising your hand, I'd love to know what's wrong with you. Same thing goes for pandas and puppies and all the adorable things that we love. When humans and many animals are born, the ratio between our eyes and our head is completely wonky. Our eyes are huge in comparison to our head, and it triggers an instinctual reaction in us to protect and love and care for something. Now, as we gain more information about that, that protection and love can turn into a anger or into a hatred or something else, but we start with that initial closeness. Someone here, Tumblr user, the nameless doll, I just grabbed one picture, but they went through all of Disney and Pixar art and fixed their eye ratio. And it is very strange realizing how big eyes have trended to take advantage of this neonatalist protection instinct. Now, there's nothing wrong with enjoying this. There's a reason why it's instinctual. It makes us go, aw, it's cute. And it makes us better attached to it. So if I can just give some suggestions of animation that trends towards the same style and facial structure. So some modern Western animation that share the same facial feature style. The Batman, because we had to distinguish it by the I guess. Surprisingly good show, but also takes into account a large for the style eyes, thin mouth, nose, etc. Gargoyles, classic. Voltron, let's face it, that's as big as most anime is here, so we can kind of go with that one. Teen Titans, the original one does. And Star vs. the Forces of Evil also has this art style. Now, a lot of the sort of like a thin line style art frame, like Steven Universe, Adventure Time, etc., do try and take advantage of the less definition in the face and more wide expressions to allow you to understand the character's emotions easier. Because remember the old classic, you can have it fast, easy, and cheap. Pick two. And animation is no different. If you want to make it fast or in good quality, it's not going to be cheap. If you want it to, and in this case, high detail, I would say, rather than good quality specifically. Does anyone else have any thoughts of a Western animation they can think of off the top of their head that uses this style? You. Mm-hmm. All right, that's a good example. You said Adam Warren? Adam Warren. Oh, okay, that makes much more sense. Static Shock, yes, a classic. Oh, Neo Yokio. We might have to spend a little bit talking about Neo Yokio later. Avatar The Last Airbender, definitely. Now, there's nothing wrong with being anime inspired. You wouldn't be here if we didn't like anime. And I think that gets caught up a lot in that people reject something out of hand going, but it follows the anime art style. No. It borrows some trades and tricks from anime that are very useful. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same thing. Now, moving along to something that I really love is just things that have flipping gorgeous animation. Before we were sort of talking about how you can do low-quality expressive animation, but anime knows how to sink its money into some gorgeous, beautiful scenes. Anything done by Studio Ghibli, Your Name was... you could... literally speechless. I don't have the proper vocabulary, and that was what I studied for 4 years, to describe how beautiful some of these animation pieces are. And I apologize now. I will butcher every Japanese name I say. Kizumonogatari, also very beautiful, very distinct, and not hyper-realistic distinct, but beautiful, high-quality animation. And if you haven't seen Paprika yet, go see it. It's one of the best anime movies in existence. Now, Western animation is not exactly known for being super beautiful, super pretty, high quality, but I do have a few suggestions. Batman, the original animated series, of course. Literally, you can go through keyframes and see the pens on desks in windows of buildings as he walks by them. Oh, yes, definitely, Art Deco. They did use the black paper to help with the highlights and to change how the entire picture was viewed. As you may or may not know, when you place paint or inks on a white paper versus a black paper, it very distinctly changes how that color shows through. If you haven't seen Spirit Stallion of the Silmarillion, it's not my favorite movie for its plot. It's kind of straightforward, but the art is gorgeous, and the amount of detail and work that was put into every muscle fiber in those horses and every blade of grass on every prairie is just wonderful. I love Star Wars: The Clone Wars for its use of a more less hyper-realistic, but more what's the word I'm looking for? A more minimalistic style to show large groups, because that's something that Star Wars: The Clone Wars did very good, was showing the expanse of the armies that you were dealing with.
That's pretty much true with any of J.D. Tartakovsky's work. Samurai Jack and
Yeah, I'll definitely be getting a little more into Samurai Jack later. But Young Justice is another one that it feels just sort of like anime pull on the facial features for the characters. But I also liked the detail on the musculature for the characters. And I also really liked the in-depth backgrounds, especially with the more alien, strange backgrounds that weren't as easy to pull, that are just cityscapes. Does anyone else have an example of something that's just gorgeous animation you have to see? Western animation. Way in the back there on the right. Yes?
Prince of Egypt?
Prince of Egypt, yes. Absolutely gorgeous. I still remember the flames, the drawing for the flames on the Rain of Fire. So well done. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Gumball. Gumball is a great one. Actually, fun story about Gumball that if you didn't know, it was originally designed as a school for failed cartoons, was the original pitch. Because the creator, whose name is escaping me for the moment, I'm bad with names even in English, used to work for an advertising firm and created animated commercials. And every time he failed to sell a commercial, he would put the character from that commercial in its own slot in his portfolio. And when he was given the chance to pitch at Cartoon Network, he included every failed animation piece he ever made. And that is how you got the Amazing World of Gumball. All they did was they tweaked it from the failed cartoon school to the sitcom premise.
I noticed you don't have anything by Max Fleischer or Ralph Bakshi up there.
Terrible with names. Give me the actual series.
Okay. Superman Short, Secret of Nim.
Oh, Secret of Nim, also very beautiful.
Max Fleischer's original Superman serials from the 1930s and 40s. Max Fleischer also was behind the Popeye cartoons for the Toon of Animation. Ralph Bakshi, of course, Fritz the Cat. In that matter, we also did.
The only reason I don't include, well, two reasons I don't include. I tend to try to not include things that I haven't seen myself. And so if I haven't seen it myself from at least enough of it that I can make a solid judgment, I tend to leave it up to the audience to include it. The second reason that I didn't include some of the Fritz the Cat, Popeye, original Superman stuff is that it is a little rougher around the edges. It's great from a historical standpoint. This is where artist subjective comes in. But I don't find them personally as beautiful animation. But
the classic Fleischer Superman short set the gold standard for motion in animation, which is why Disney bought the rights to Fleischer's rotoscoping technology.
yes, and that is awesome, and it is something that I'm glad you've brought up because it is important. But it's not my cup of tea. So we'll take one more and then we'll move on to the next one. Oh, Redwall, the original Redwall animated series. That one had some beautiful backgrounds and artistic work done on the creation, but it's kind of, the animation for the creatures themselves was kind of weak in my opinion. So I don't know if I would classify that as an all-time, but if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend it. It is yet another one of the classics that should at least be paid attention to. Titan AE. We will also get to that, but before I forget.
From the previous group, the Summer Wars, you see that?
Oh, Summer Wars is a classic, yes. All right, so I've got to make sure that I don't completely run out of time, and I want to get through a bunch more and get a bunch more of your opinions. So, next up, genre options. You can't see them because there's that many of them. It is intentional. There are so many different genres available in Japanese anime, and particularly now that that's starting to branch out more into China and Korea, where they're starting to get their foothold into animation a little bit better. There's been some great pieces coming out recently, but that's another panel for another time. But they don't have, everything in the West, it seems, has to be a comedy, right? You know, everything's Family Guy, everything's The Simpsons, you know. All right, I'm going to level with you. I am the absolute epitome of an old curmudgeon. I hate comedy. I know, I'm an awful person, but I cannot stand a comedy. The moment you tell me that something's intention is to make me laugh, I can't stand it. If it happens to make me laugh on accident, because it's got hilarious other things going on, and I get some chuckles, awesome. But if you tell me the purpose of this show is to make me laugh, it's no good. It doesn't work for me. One of the reasons why I love anime is because it gives me all those other options. So I've got a few examples, and then of course I'll go back to you guys to pull from your brains of Western non-comedies that express some of the other genres that are out there. So if you've not seen Netflix Castlevania yet, oh my goodness, that is amazing. You need to go watch it. It's only a couple episodes long, and it is so beautiful, so well done, and some of the best action, blood, and gore I've seen in a while. They keep saying they're going to do more, but you know how it is with Netflix. The original Aeon Flux has got to be one of the weirdest and coolest pieces of animation I've seen. Just because of how weirdly drawn everything is. But again, another great action sci-fi in this case. Wakfu. Yes, Wakfu is amazing. It's a French animation. based off of a French MMORPG. Yeah, that was my reaction too when I heard that.
There is now another Sword Art Online.
Oh yeah, no, we're not going to touch that. I particularly love the dub for Wakfu, and I'll tell you why. Any dub that goes so far as to change a character's name so that 3 seasons in a pun will still work is a dub team that is invested in the show. And it's so well done. They go to great lengths. Like I said, they changed one character's name just so that the pun would still work. Because I watched the first couple episodes in French, realized that there was a dub, and I wanted to check it out. I liked the dub voices better, so I watched it. I'm like, why did they change just the one character's name? It's not even like they changed it to Joe or Bob or something that'd be easier for American artists or American listeners to understand. Then 3 seasons later, they make a pun about his name, which I won't spoil. And I had to stop for a second. I went, wait a minute. Went back to the French version, found the scene, and yep, that was literally the only reason they changed it. And I was so happy about it. Has anyone actually heard of or seen The Max? Awesome, am I right? Deep psychological drama and trauma, at that matter, that leaves you second guessing the whole time. Are you, is what's being presented to you real? Or are you just being presented with this insane ramblings of someone who's totally lost it because of the psychological trauma they've endured? And they play back and forth with you about whether or not that's actually it the entire time. And I absolutely love it. Do we have any more suggestions of yes?
Neo Yokio.
Said we'll talk about it later. The joke was funny the first time. Moving along. Boondocks, great example. It is still technically a comedy, but at least it's a comedy that has something bigger to say. Wizards. I don't think I'm familiar with that one.
It's rather iconic. It goes back to the heavy metal age.
Oh, heavy metal, so good.
And it's like a red, solid blood dude riding these two-legged lizards. And it's an argument over whether it's right to use technology or whether it's right to use magic, and it's a tale of two brothers. And it's a horribly bloody affair. It was back in the time when everyone thought the cartoons were for kids, and this was an extraordinarily adult affair.
So Wizards. I'm going to have to look that up after I'm done with this panel because that's something that it sounds like I should add. I haven't had caught you yet. We're not talking anime movies right now. We're talking just Western.
There's this was from the 90s, early 90s, called Heavy Metal and Heavy Metal 2000 are both great examples of that sort of grindhouse, that sort of grindhouse perspective. Really nitty gritty, really bloody, really in your face about where it's going. I definitely recommend those as well. We got any others? Yes.
Watership Down.
Oh, Watership Down. Okay, I've seen Watership Down. I was never a fan of the book. I'm not a fan of the movie. But you know what? If you really want to traumatize someone, Watership Down. Any others before we move on to the next one? Oh, yes, way in the back there. We'll get to Miraculous Ladybug in a bit, actually. I have her set aside for something specific. All right, so let's move along. See how much of my time... Okay.
All right, another reason I love anime, and that I'm sure a lot of you do too, is the in-depth character studies, where literally an entire anime is about exploring the moral and ethics of a particular character. Now, in my case, for example, I hate Trigun with a burning passion because I hate Vash's ethics, but I can at least recognize that anime held my attention for the entire time because it was a study of his morality and ethics. Same with Evangelion. Death Note is a great example, and if you haven't seen Katanagatari yet, I highly recommend it. Beautiful animation, as well as a very in-depth study of what does it mean to be a weapon. What does it mean to devote yourself in service to another person? Now, we don't have as many Western character studies to work with, but we have a few. So specifically, Avatar: The Last Airbender and Korra as well, both focus in on their main characters. They're hyper-focused on what is the morality and ethics that these characters believe in, and how does that impact the world around them. BoJack Horseman. As I mentioned, I don't like comedies. I still liked BoJack Horseman. I may have watched it on a bed that my friend said I would enjoy it, even though I hate comedies. I still enjoyed it. But it's all about the depth of depression and what that kind of self-hate can do to you and the people around you. Samurai Jack, especially with the release of the final season and finally getting some friggin' closure. Anybody remember Daria? Yes. Daria I like because it was a very, it used animation to convey an idea without stepping outside of the bounds of the norm. So it wasn't about fantasy flights or crazy things that couldn't happen. It just used its ability to tell stories in a way that couldn't have been done if they had just done a rote, what's the word I'm looking for? A regular sitcom style live action. It just couldn't have been done that way without having the same impact. Do we have any other thoughts for Western character studies? Slugterra. I'm not familiar with that one, actually.
It's, the way I summarize it is about people who shoot slugs at each other. Yeah.
Interesting. I will have to check it out.
We could actually go back to Batman the Animated Series on that.
Going all the way back to Batman the Animated Series, yes, that's...
Ever showed their character studies on one villain. So,
Or even one civilian in a few cases, which I loved.
There's Batman Beyond, and there's
Troll Hunters, yes, I will talk more about Troll Hunters in a bit. But yes, Batman Beyond is a great example because it particularly takes an examination of living in somebody's shadow and how to deal and cope with living up to expectations. Back in the back there.
I'm not sure if this is character studies, but I got some of that kind of theme from the background animated series.
Not a Western one, but Bakugan I could see some of that. Here's a hint: if you want character studies, actually, sports anime tend to be pretty good because they've got to do something to make the sport in question interesting. Because there's only so much you can hype up the actual sport, even using animation, before you have to go either one of two directions, where it's either Yu-Gi-Oh! Silly Extremes or in-depth character studies and make something out of the characters instead. I'm personally a big fan of All Out because I'm a huge rugby fan, but there you go.
I got two, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
Shaolin Showdown and Jackie Chan animated.
Yes, I love both of those. Shaolin Showdown is a great example, as well as Jackie Chan Animated Adventures. Both in-depth character studies of it, as well as in the case of Shaolin, I loved the internal consistency of the world they created, as well as with Jackie Chan. Who didn't love Uncle? So many garlic jokes, so little time. All right, let's see. How am I doing? Okay, I've still got time. All right, so for my next slide, we'll talk about anime for adults. And I do not mean the sexy kind. Well, sometimes, depending what your kink is, I guess. So Berserk, both the original series and the new adaptation. Death Parade, Madoka Magica, Psychopaths. These are anime that discuss things that, frankly, young children are probably not ready yet to handle the discussions about. Death Parade is all about acceptance of death and what death means in the over-encompassing view of our world and how that handles. If you don't really understand the sort of existential fear of, I'm going to die someday, you're probably not going to get as much out of it. And if you're a kid, I at least hope you don't understand that existential fear yet. Psychopaths, talking about justice system as well as nature versus nurture, freedom versus security, all these in-depth things. And Berserk, we have blood, gore, and tits. And lots of rape, yes, lots of that. So these are all things that honestly probably are not going to play off as well for younger audiences. Now, there are a few more comedies than perhaps I'd like in the next section, but hey, I am working with a limited palette here. So, who has seen Last Man by Mondo? If you haven't seen it, it's originally French, because apparently the French know what they're doing. And it can be found on Verve, plug here, with Mondo being the creators. And it is a fantastic, absolutely fantastic animation about a boxer who gets wrapped up in a Cthulhu death cult and has to fight his way out of it. That is the super short version, and it's pretty awesome. Heavy Metal, as was mentioned, is a great example of something that is definitely not meant for kids. Now, just because I was shocked by this thing's existence, who here has heard of Spicy City? Wow, okay, more than I expected, more than I usually get. So Spicy City, I also have to really recommend, is an anthology, sort of like Crypt Keeper or Elvira, Mistress of the Night kind of setup. Every episode starts where you're in the bar, Spicy City. Something that is tangentially related to the animation that's about to come happens. And the hostess introduces you to the story and walks you through the story. The animation style changes, the point and premise changes, but they're consistently good, they're consistently well done, and they're consistently heavy subject matter. One of the very first episode focuses on, is love made in virtual reality real? And the conclusion, slight spoiler here, is that yes. In fact, it can be even more real because you're not tied by physical attraction. And it becomes a case of a woman who's conventionally attractive, who chooses to escape her abuse of life through the virtual reality, and a guy who is a disabled vet who is unable to get around, falling in love over a virtual screen because they don't have to know what the other person looks like, and they don't care. The detective's the main character. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great stuff.
And then like each episode addresses a different element of like sexual intimidation.
Yeah, each episode completely addresses something different, and that's one of the things I like about it. Archer and the Venture Brothers, I mean, again, I don't like comedies, but I can recognize good stuff when I see it. It's well done. Archer has this whole bit on Chekhov's gun, which is just brilliant pun work. The Venture Brothers, I love a good take on bad 70s animation. And yeah, it's good stuff, but it is all decidedly adult-oriented. Do I have any other suggestions?
While it was actively marketed to kids, an incredibly mature series for what it was is Exo Squad.
Exo Squad.
Yeah, it's basically a futuristic war drama about soldiers in exosuits, but despite being a kids' cartoon, there's on-screen deaths, some of which are named characters. It deals with invading armies, enemy collaborators, ethics about. Well, it's one of the few cartoons from the 90s that deals with race relations that isn't just coy and gag-worthy.
Oof, heavy stuff. Good, I like it. Exo. Again, talking Western animation, not anime.
Skeleton Warriors.
Skeleton Warriors.
It's a cartoon one from the 90s on CBS, which basically really definitely kind of like a post-apocalyptic world, which basically the power source of the planet was basically split into two to create a huge apocalyptic war.
Always gotta love an apocalypse. Metalocalypse, yes, great example. Ren and Stimpy. What can I say? Unfortunately, the actions of its creator have kind of soured it for me. So okay. Slight philosophizing moment here. I am of the opinion that you should be able to separate art from the artist, and that just because an artist is a terrible person doesn't mean that the art itself is bad and is devoid of meaning. For example, Recovery of an MMO Junkie is made by a Nazi. It's still a great show. But so there's a big old allegedly in front of this. But allegedly, because I will not be held for any suits about it, used his position as a major animator to groom and then sleep with underage women. Yeah, and plus kind of just being a jerk to other animators. He lost his position as the head of Ren and Stimpy because he was apparently so awful to work with that they said that they would rather take the chance of the show failing than continue to work with him. So that doesn't mean that a art piece itself is devoid of its worth just because its creator is an awful person. So, moving along. Experimental. Anime has had license to build and create truly experimental pieces. Genius Party, whatever you do, do not watch it while you are drunk. My head hurts so much. Paprika is also an example, again, of something that's really amazing experimental artwork. Devilman Crybaby. Watch Devilman Crybaby. If you haven't yet, just have tissues nearby. You're going to need them.
Don't watch it. You're very, very squeamish.
If you're squeamish, you probably shouldn't watch anything with the experimental tag on it. So, some experimental Western animation. This is where I bring in Ren and Stimpy. Let me go through these real quick. So, Western ideas of experimental animation tend to be a little weird. So you have like the Harvey Birdman Space Ghost Coast to Coast reuse animation, which is boggles my mind, but I appreciate it as an art piece. Ren and Stimpy was, for its time, a very interesting use of that style of animation, combining hyper-realism with minimalism, back and forth, back and forth. The Tick, because The Tick. Invader Zim, anything by Jonan Vasquez is great experimental pieces. Johnny the Homicidal Maniac is one of my favorite long-running series that I enjoyed. Yes. Yes, I read Scream. Anyways, I read it. I don't know if I blacked it out, though. If you haven't watched Over the Garden Wall, it is an amazing piece. I absolutely love it, and the sheer star power of people who signed up to work on it. You've got Elijah Wood, you've got Christopher Lloyd. I could literally spend 5 minutes just going down the voice artists who were all people who saw the script and then immediately signed up for it. Like, they didn't care that it was animated, they just wanted to be part of this script.
We're going to talk experimental Western animation. What about the granddaddy of surrealistic American animation itself, the Pink Panther?
Oh, Pink Panther!
Yeah, Warhol in motion was the original concept.
Yeah, thank you. This is why I pulled from the audience. Pink Panther is an amazing example of experimental animation to use the to use the color theory, the blue and the pinks, and just the solid bash in your face of color, as well as to draw the style. Again, it's great. You need to watch it. If you haven't, somehow, go watch it.
Pretty much any incarnation of Felix the Cat. The whole point, especially in the originals, but in any version, is this is a cartoon, which means if we can draw it, we can make it. Let's play with that concept. And actually, there was a surprisingly good, the movie was good too, a surprisingly good, weird 90s one called The Twisted Tales of Felix that did a lot of really trippy stuff.
Twisted Tales is in my backlog of need to watch it because of this panel. So that is one I will take your recommendation on that we should see at some point. Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat.
It's Cuphead the series.
Cuphead the series. Actually, and because this was brought up before, this is where I will mention Neo Yokio. Neo Yokio.
It's that good.
So, I want to trap Jaden Smith in a room and sit down with him and force him to answer some questions, or else I will take a baseball bat to him. Because I can't decide whether or not Neo Yokio is the worst thing I've ever seen or the best thing I've ever seen. I'm leaning towards worst, but it still could technically be good, and it frustrates me that I can't figure it out. If you want to know where I'm coming from on that, the idea is that Neo Yokio is actually a send-off of generic anime, and that it's Jaden making commentary on how anime that is made just for rich people who can sponsor such things is this bad because it just caters to them and doesn't explore anything deeper. Or it could be that Jaden Smith's just that full of himself. I don't know. Yes, way back in the back. Adventure Time was definitely an experimental piece and did very good. We'll actually talk a little bit more about that in a second, but I've got short time, so I've got to keep going. 3D animation. This is one area where I think we've got Japan at the moment. But there are some great ones. Knights of Sidonia, Ajin. God Eater, Land of the Lustrous is Japanese Steven Universe and is gorgeous. And is probably one of the best examples of an animation that could not be done in traditional animation style. It needed to use computer graphics because you cannot take the kind of light refractions necessary in traditional animation to make the beautiful way that works with the translucency of the gem pieces. BBK, BRNK is another one that's pretty good, but wasn't my cup of tea, but others will love it. So, some 3D animation pieces. Whoever mentioned Miraculous Ladybug earlier, it is a great 3D animation piece. It is more kid-centric, I'll admit, but it is very well done and makes very good use of the 3D. Troll Hunters is amazing, but I have to make a recommendation. If you watched Troll Hunters, because Guillermo del Toro was the one who created it, who is the greatest director to ever live, in my opinion, read the book. Troll Hunters, the series was created because of Guillermo's book, and the book is straight up one of the darkest things I've ever read in my life. Like, in the Troll Hunters series, they just imply the trolls eat people. In the Troll Hunters book, you find the remains of the children that they've eaten. And several of the trolls have, like, entire rooms filled with children's things left over after their meals. Yeah, it's really dark. Ruby is amazing. Monty Ohm, rest his soul. It has gone downhill a little in quality since he passed, but, when you lose an innovator like that, there's only so much you can do to keep it going afterwards. The How to Train Your Dragon series just keeps getting better and better, and even their side pieces on Netflix are astoundingly well made. And I highly recommend it. Let's see, how am I doing on time? I'm running short on time, so we're just going to sort of mosey on to the next piece, and if I have time to keep talking, we'll keep talking afterwards. Oh, some of my suggestions seem to have disappeared. Pout. Oh well. So, we'll go with what I've got. If you haven't seen Motor City is amazing and great and should have lasted for a dozen seasons. Instead, we got like half of one before they canceled it, which stinks, but it was gorgeous art, inventive style. Also, Megas XLR, one of my favorite animation pieces ever. You definitely need to go watch it. If you were unfortunate enough to experience the Powerpuff Girls via their reboot, please go back and watch the original. The original is amazing and beautifully animated and has a great story to tell people of any age that watch it. I cannot say the same about the new one.
Which is the difference? Which is the difference between the old one and the new one?
The new one doesn't have much to say on a moral and ethical standpoint. It just kind of throws things at a wall and hopes. Whereas the old one really had a lot to say about its core concepts, friendship, sisterhood, etc. Who remembers the Susan B. Anthony show episode, for pity's sake? That was one of my favorites ever. That one was so good. And it was just very powerful and really had a lot of things to say. The new one, not so much. Adventure Time was one of the ones I had up here before my computer apparently ate the last half of my slide. And yeah, there are a lot of really great Western animation pieces that are out there. They exist. Don't pass them up. Also, for anybody who has been embroiled in the whole Cal Arts controversy online, shut up. Seriously, if you hear anybody complaining about that, you can tell that they don't know anything about animation. The style of animation that is prevalent now is a trend that has started all the way back to Adventure Time and will probably keep going until another art style becomes prevalent. The current art style is interesting, as Gumball, Adventure Time, Steven Universe can show us there's a lot that can be done with it. These things move in cycles. If you don't like this cycle of animation style, wait till the next one comes around, it'll be about 5 years. All right, so I think they're about to kick me out. So thank you everybody for coming. If you want to see a recording of this so you can go over the suggestions, I do have my card up here with my YouTube channel. Otherwise, thank you very much for participating. I'll be up here until they kick me out, and then I will be out there after that. Thank you very much for coming. Have an awesome Colossalcon!
I've got an animated movie for you. Have you ever heard of Rock and Rule?
Rock and Rule, I
Oh, I
have
love
not.
Jackie Chan Adventures.
Such a good one, ain't it?
Oh, such a great show.
All right, let me...
Great panel, too.
I think it's Canadian animated.
Would not surprise me. The Canadians are pretty
This was
good.
very good panel.
It's supposed to be a
Thank
sci-fi future. All the people in it look like anamorphic. They have sort of animal
Rock
features
and-
to them. It features the music talent of Deborah Harry, Cheap Trick,
Very nice.
Iggy Pop.
Very nice. Thank you.
But like I mentioned, Skeleton Wars, I mean, the entire